welcome to Half the Battle, and welcome my friends to main character May. Now, as I had sort of promised, this month we'll be looking at...
Duke of Earl.
Yes, Duke. We've got toys, file cards, comics, cartoons, and even movies to look at.
And today we'll be discussing the toys.
Now, let's just see. According to G.I.Joe.com, there have been 51 action figures of Duke, not even counting variations?
Well, screw that! I'm not covering all of those!
So today, we'll only be looking at all the versions from the original line, and next week, it's a selection from later years, if they are notable or funny or awful enough. By the way, if you thought 51 versions was a record, as of this date, May 2019, there have been 56 action figures of Cobra Commander. But the absolute king of the plastic hill is Snake Eyes, with 68 freaking toys! And that's just counting the 3 3/4 inch and 4 inch stuff.
Well, we'd better start at the beginning.
Meet Duke, version 1. This figure was released in 1983 with, surprisingly, almost no original body parts. You would think they'd spring for a new mold for such a major character, but this was still 1983 when Hasbro reused any body part they could. Yeah, so the head and torso are the only original parts. The others are from Dog, Gung-Ho, and Major Blood. Duke was first available as a mail-in figure and was later released on card. Looking at this figure...
You know, Duke has often been referred to as a Boy Scout.
And while that's more to do with his personality, he certainly looks the part when you see his outfit. The detailing here is pretty good, for 1983 anyway, with the green on the chest and the black gun molded on the leg.
The only real problem I have with the figure is the head.
He's got a goofy grin that adds to the Boy Scout look, but isn't really appropriate for a hardened soldier. Also, his head is too round. Look, I'll level with you, I was introduced to the character of Duke by the cartoon. So to me, this figure, well, it doesn't look all that much like Duke. It did come with some good accessories. A machine gun, a backpack, as well as a helmet, similar to the ones a lot of 1982 figures got. And a pair of binoculars, those, once again, add to the Boy Scout look. For some reason, his card art has him holding Snowjob's rifle, the one that became the generic Joe weapon in the cartoon, instead of the gun he came with.
Seems strange considering this was a mail-in figure first.
So they should have known well in advance what weapon he came with for the card art. By the way, there were like 5 different variations of this figure, with minor paint or even body part changes, depending if you got an early mail-in version, a later mail-in version, or a carded one. But the differences are so small, I'm not gonna bother getting into them. There was even a Chinese version, but even that was mostly identical to the original, with slightly different arms and waist, but nothing really notable. Overall, well, the head could have been better, but they did a pretty good job here for the most part, especially for an early 1983 figure. I should also mention the reason I first saw Duke in the cartoon is that this figure was never released in Belgium, so my first exposure to a Duke toy was version 2. This one. Yeah.
You can imagine my crushing disappointment, considering this toy didn't look a thing like the Duke I knew!
Meet Tiger Force Duke. This figure was released in 1988, with obviously no original body parts. Same figure, same accessories, but different colors. Well, I say same figure. They used Hit and Run's arms and the waist of a Cobra officer, but it's barely noticeable. They did the same with the Chinese version, by the way, meaning that one was probably copied of the Tiger Force version. They sort of reversed the colors of the original, giving him a green shirt and tan pants, though with tiger stripes, while the first was the opposite. I don't have anything against repaints, providing they're done well. Let's not revisit Interrogator here. And this one is mostly fine. A good subdued look, especially for Tiger Force. So, the figure is pretty okay.
Except for one thing.
They turned him from a blonde into a brunette.
I mean, why?
And when they repaint the figure, they do this all the time, changing the hair color. Look, new colors for a uniform, that I can understand. But why the hair? It doesn't make sense from a character standpoint.
Hell, they even do this when it's not a repaint.
For example, just like Duke, Hawk went from blonde to brunette. In this case, it was done to make him more distinguished from Duke, making the Tiger Force version even more baffling, since now they have the same damn hair color again. Objectively, this isn't a bad figure, but to me personally, it'll always have a black mark against it, since it was my first Duke toy as a kid, and it looked nothing like Duke.
With that, we'll leave the 80s and delve into the early 90s with a sharp change in look.
Meet Duke version 3. This figure was released in 1992 with all original body parts. He's got a tan look now with red highlights.
And how to describe this?
He looks a little futuristic without actually being so. It's a pretty nice look with a lot more detailing than in the 80s, especially on the chest. Though the gun he has strapped to that chest is pointing straight down at his crotch. So if he's sitting down and gets a jolt, making the gun go off, he can say goodbye to Duke Jr.
And staying with that general concept, let's take a look at the accessories.
He's got a helmet and gun and such, and those are fine, sure, if a little uninteresting, but he also comes with a huge cannon. Now, usually people joke about missiles and cannons and such being phallic symbols, but, well, they have to be tube-shaped, don't they? So there's not much they can do about the imagery. It's purely coincidental.
In this case, however,
they put a seat on the cannon. He is literally supposed to have the thing between his legs as it fires. Yeah, there's no way that's accidental. What were they thinking? The figure itself is quite good, really, though you will note a shift from a generally military look to seeming more desert-orientated.
I wonder why that is. Maybe the next toy will shed some light on this.
Oh, there it is. Now it all makes perfect sense. Meet Duke version 4. This figure was released in 1993 with all original body parts. And again, he looks ready for desert combat.
So why is that? What happened between 1988 and 1992 that could have had such an influence?
5 months ago, Saddam Hussein started this cruel war against Kuwait. Tonight, the battle has been joined.
Oh right, the first Gulf War. Yeah, Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm were considered huge successes for the US and allied nations, so Hasbro thought, hey, let's profit off that.
Classy! Though, to be fair, they were far from the only company to exploit the Gulf conflict.
President Saddam Hussein did not invade Kuwait. He conquered Kuwait.
And the less said about that right now, the better.
As far as this toy goes, well, the figure itself is fine, but it looks like a generic US soldier as seen on footage from the Gulf conflict. He just doesn't look like Duke. There's nothing to set him apart as being the character of Duke. Hell, you could army build with this toy and nobody would be the wiser. And those were the toys. These were the only figures of Duke in the original line.
I am of course lying because I want to avoid what comes next. Yeah, there were 2 more toys in the original line that we have to look at.
And for them, we must leave the desert wars of the early 90s and head into...
Space, the final frontier.
Yep.
Because the last 2 figures are from G.I. Joe's own Space Force, Star Brigade. Meet Duke version, what the hell am I looking at?
No, really, the hell is this?
I actually got writer's block trying to come up with something to compare this to. The closest I got was professional wrestler that's also a robot. Anyway, meet Duke version 5. This figure was also released in 1993 with, 1 original body part.
And I sense some of you may want an explanation for this, thing.
In 1993, the Joes got their own space sub-team called Star Brigade. Some were regular figures, but others were, well, these things, called armor tech figures. The idea was this was high-tech robot battle armor for fighting in space.
And just saying that makes my head hurt.
All these armor tech figures shared body parts, so the only original part is his head. Hasbro, whose motto is "a penny not spent on toy design is a penny earned." As for Duke himself, well, where does the human body end and the suit begin? It's the same height as a regular figure, sort of, but where does his left arm go, considering it's a missile launcher? Is it like tucked inside his torso?
That can't be comfortable.
Also, the color scheme is half black and half blue. Did Two-Face design this thing? Overall, yeah, I don't like it. But I will say this does look like it would be a ton of fun for kids. And that was really the point at the time, wasn't it?
So I can't say I hate this thing.
One weird quirk of this figure is that it has a hole in the back, like most G.I.Joe figures, but there isn't a screw in there, so you can't take the toy apart easily. In other words, the hole serves no purpose whatsoever. It's just weird, you know?
With that, we come to the last figure of Duke in the original line, and it's also from Star Brigade.
Meet Duke version 6. This figure was released in 1994 with some original body parts. The waist and legs are from Skycreeper and have much improved color here. And you know, I always thought this torso was just reused from Barricade, but when doing research for the episode, I found out that no, they look very similar, but the torso and arms are completely original. The figure itself, well, it looks okay. I mean, it's still a guy in futuristic space armor, but better than the last version. There is a shocking lack of detailing on this figure though. Not counting the head, he has just one paint application, the green on the gloves and legs. Everything else is just the molded plastic colors. And this was 1994! They could have done so much more!
Where this toy really falls down though is with the accessories.
Specifically the backpack/helmet combo. It's both clever and incredibly stupid. The helmet attaches to the backpack on a hinge, so you can lower it onto the head using that. It's actually a pretty neat play feature.
Or it would be if it wasn't for two things.
1. It looks like he's wearing a fishbowl on his head. And 2. His neck is still exposed. And I have it on good authority that astronauts will vehemently object to having to use spacesuits that leave skin exposed. Especially around the head region.
So yeah, that's a design fail.
And it could have been done right so easily. Just have the torso form a seal with the helmet, like you see with, for example, the Toxo Viper. But no, the cold vacuum of space is no match for Duke's chin, apparently. Hell, say what you will about the armor tech version, and I just did, but even that figure had a helmet that formed a seal with the suit. Overall, the figure is mediocre, but the helmet drops it to being ridiculous. And those really were all the Duke figures that were from the original line.
And honestly, I'm not too fond of any of them.
Objectively, the original is probably the best, but it still isn't really Duke to me, due to how I first got to know the character. The other normal Dukes are okay, while the space ones are hilariously awful in their own ways. The non-space ones are fine, but I still went ahead and made my own Duke figure when I started collecting, so that's Duke to me. Next week, we'll be taking a look at some of the figures that came out after the original line.
Starting with the 1997 version. May God have mercy on us all. Well, I'll see you next time, everybody. And hey, why not like, share, and subscribe if that's your thing.